22. Supporting social science research in West Africa. Claude Ake of CASS. Nigeria is one of the most difficult places to work as a consultant in economic development. It is the most complex country in Africa, geographically situated between the Sahel to the north and the Gulf of Guinea to the south in the Atlantic Ocean, covering an area of 923,769 square kilometers or 356,669 square miles, with a population of over 211 million. Nigeria is not a unitary state. It is a multinational federation of states, several of which have been home to indigenous pre-colonial states and kingdoms since the second millennium BC. There are some 250 ethnic groups speaking 500 distinct languages, all identifying with a wide variety of cultures. The three largest ethnic groups are the Hausa Fulani in the north, Yoruba in the west, and Igbo in the east. All of this persists against the best efforts of African intellectuals trying to construct a new form of thinking to carry their country into a new era of prosperity. One such person was Claude Ake from Port Harcourt. The Center for Advanced Social Sciences, CASS as the acronym says, was the brainchild of Professor Claude Ake. Professor Ake was a top authority on the political economy of Africa. After teaching in some major universities in the West, he decided to return to Nigeria to champion the fight for social justice, economic development, and democracy. His passion was to challenge African intellectuals to come up with their own solutions to Africa's problems rather than relying on external sources. Claude Ake believed that Western social science, whether consciously or inadvertently, were fostering capitalist values and capitalist development on the Third World, and as such serving imperialist ends. His desire was to posit alternatives which may more successfully overcome the persistent underdevelopment of Africa. The Ford Foundation in Nigeria had convinced Claude that critical to his endeavors was the need for a system that would effectively communicate the findings of his think tank to a wider audience. Within 2 years of our coming out on the international scene with our campaign to popularize information systems, I was invited by Ford Foundation of Nigeria to undertake a consultancy to design an information infrastructure for this new think tank in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. At first, Professor Ake appeared skeptical about my capacity to deliver to him a new vision on information and communication management. I was an unknown quantity, unknown to him as well as to the African diaspora. However, before I had gotten halfway through my analysis, Claude was convinced of the value of my work. A lecture at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Claude was so impressed that he immediately organized for me to give a lecture to a group of company directors in Port Harcourt. We spoke about information management and controlling the message and the media. Then he requested that the prestigious Nigerian Institute of International Affairs hold a session in Lagos at which I would be the featured speaker. The Nigerian Institute of International Affairs was established in 1961 with the aim of providing an incubator for ideas on what direction Nigeria should take on international affairs. It is a specialized instrument of foreign policy formulation in Nigeria and serves as an intellectual base upon which decision makers rely for informed opinion and expert advice in order to make rational choices between contending policy options. My lecture was held in Lagos, and Claude himself flew up from Port Harcourt to attend. It was a small group, but all well-established authors in their own right. It was in the form of a roundtable discussion, and I remember that they took pride in inviting Dudley Thompson, the Jamaica High Commissioner to Nigeria, to attend. Dudley was an important Caribbean person in Africa at that time. He had just been appointed as Jamaica High Commissioner to Nigeria, accredited to Ghana, Sierra Leone, Namibia, and Cameroon. During this period, Thomas had become one of the foremost advocates for reparation for slavery and the slave trade, and was named one of the 12 persons appointed by the Organization of African Unity, OAU, to advocate for the strengthening of international movement for reparations. The discussion centered on the fact that we in the Caribbean took free license in promoting different aspects of our culture as being of African origin. While some of the professors were skeptical at the authenticity of some of these claims, I was quick to point out that when we left the continent on slave ships, we did not leave as Africans. We left as Wolof, Mandingo, Twi, Hausa, and various other ethnic nationalities. However, once we touched the shores of the Caribbean Sea, we all arrived as enslaved Africans, no distinctions made. The slave system did not tolerate any such distinctions, and we ourselves realized that we could only survive by claiming one single source of origin in order to free ourselves. This was the legacy that gave us the authority to redefine our Africanness. Unfortunately for you, our brothers remaining in Africa, this tribal decomposition became your legacy to overcome in your struggle to forge national unity. I dare say it was quite a lively discussion. The director of the institute was so moved as to present me with a wooden carving of the seal of the institute and about 15 of what they considered to be their foremost publications. I had gone to the session in the company of Crispin Gregoire, a Dominican, whose wife at that time was the deputy head of Ford Foundation in Nigeria. As we were exiting the conference room, I turned to Crispin and said, "I don't even know what happened to the books they just gave me." He replied, "Don't worry, they are well organized here. By the time we get to the car, a person will appear with all of your gifts." As we got to our car in the parking lot, I started to look around when suddenly, like out of nowhere, I heard a voice saying, "Where shall I put these, sir?" And there was Crispin. "Put them in the back seat, thanks." As we drove off, I said to Crispin, "Where did he come from?" I told you these Nigerians are very good at protocol, and I mean really good. Claude had also found out that I had flown to Nigeria on an economy class ticket from Europe. He insisted that the Ford Foundation upgrade my travel to first class, as he thought that was more fitting of a man of your stature, his words. The Wedding of the Obas' niece. One thing that Claude did was to insist that I spend the night in his village of Omuku. Omuku is a town in Rivers State with a population of about 200,000 people. It is located in the southern part of the state, near the boundary with Delta State and Imo State. It is the headquarters of the Ogba Egbena Nadoni local government area, one of the major cities of the Ogba people in Rivers State of Nigeria. I went to this new house that Claude had built on the outskirts of town. He had organized for his brother to accompany me there as he could not spare the time. It so happened that there was a big wedding going on at the palace of King Chukwumela Obi II, Eze Oba of Ogbaland. This paramount ruler was crowned on the 19th of December 1970 and later became the longest serving of Nigeria's first-class monarchs. He died in 2020 after celebrating his 80th birthday and 50th anniversary on his throne. This was the marriage of his niece to some commoner. I had not intended to be going to any event like this, and was well put off because all I had was a pair of denim jeans. This is not what you wear to the wedding at the Obas Palace. Fortunately for me, I had walked with a white cotton jilaba. Now, the jilaba is a long, loose-fitting unisex outer robe with full sleeves that was a popular wear in the Maghreb region of North Africa. I had purchased mine in a market in Cairo and was in the habit of using it as a nightgown to sleep in when I was not in an air-conditioned room. The logic was that it would cover most of my body while it left little exposure to the malaria mosquito. When I told Claude's family that all I had was this garment, they insisted that it looked so good that I must wear it. I think they just said that to reduce my self-consciousness of going to a royal wedding in my pajamas, so to speak. Anyway, I had to go, as Claude had already organized an invitation for me from the Oba. So there I was, seated under the tent for the honored guests, which was very close to the main tent from which the Oba officiated. Claude's brother was on one side of me and a friend of his family on the other. Claude's brother was providing me with a running commentary of the proceedings. Then came time for the groom's party to present their allotted portions of kola nut wine to the Oba for his blessings of the marriage. In case you are not aware of it, the kola nut is of very high significance in Igbo culture. It's often given as a symbol of hospitality, friendship, and respect, and is presented to guests at important social events such as weddings, funerals, and infant naming ceremonies. Now, there was a young man who was very fluent in the language. He approached the Oba, made his citation on behalf of the groom, and then withdrew to be followed by trays of this kola nut wine. On his second approach, he did his citation in the traditional manner, kneeling down before the Oba so as to ensure that his head was not higher than that of the king. Well, from my perspective, this was when all hell seemed to have broken out. Before he could get into his melodical recitation, an old man who was seated behind the king, part of the Oba's party, rose up, came to the front, and started to make a lot of noise in the most aggressive of forms. From what I was seeing, everything suddenly descended into total confusion. The young man withdrew, and there was consternation in the groom's camp, which was just behind our tent. I asked Claude's brother what was happening. He was just laughing while claiming that he really didn't know. Something had gone wrong. He was going to go into the groom's tent to find out. The proceedings stopped for about 15 minutes, after which Claude's brother returned with an astonishing story. First, he assured me that everything was back on track. What had happened was that the groom was using his school friend, who was very proficient in the language, to present the story about himself. It was all going well until the old man came forward to protest that the petitioner had approached the Oba with his shoes on. This infraction, in the old man's view, was a sign of disrespect, as only the Oba was allowed to wear shoes in his court. The upshot was that the cola wine settlement had been raised by 50%, which had the groom's party running around trying to find the additional vessels for more cola wine. At one point, I was feeling tired, not understanding a word of what was being said. Claude's brother implored me that we had to wait for the food. I looked around and said, "Food? I don't see any food around." He calmly assured me, "You're looking at the wrong thing. You see those women on the other side with those big bags? They're from the village, and what do you think the bags are for? They're never a mistake." Sure enough, food was served, the bride and groom finally appeared, and all of these guests kept approaching them, placing US dollar bills on their foreheads, while a person behind was kept busy picking them up as they fell away. The next day, we went to one of the Obas' residences where the newlyweds were staying. In discussion with the bride, I asked her if she was nervous when the incident with the orator had blown up. She just laughed and said how they all found it so funny that he would forget to remove his shoes. "He shouldn't have worn socks," she said. "Maybe he was trying to save his socks." I found that so interesting. In our culture, that was equivalent to the caterers forgetting to deliver the wedding cake. It would have been a catastrophe, but over here, they weren't the least perturbed. Meeting Ken Saro-Wiwa. One of the final favors from Claude was an opportunity to meet with Ken Saro-Wiwa, 1941 to 1995. Ken was an amazing guy, a writer, television producer, an environmental activist by profession. Saro-Wiwa was a member of the Ogoni people, an ethnic minority in Nigeria whose homeland was Ogoni land. Their lands, which comprised most of the Niger Delta, had been the source for crude oil extraction by Shell since the 1950s. The massive pollution that the oil giant Shell was causing in the Delta left the citizens impoverished and in very poor health. Some citizens even attempted to steal oil from the pipes, causing explosions and injuring themselves in the process. As the land suffered, the people suffered. Ken's struggle was against this injustice. I was happy to have met him before his brutal execution by the military regime, the late General Sani Abacha, on November 19, 1995. That incident caused Nigeria to be suspended from the Commonwealth of Nations. Justice, however slow, is never really forgotten. On January 30th, 2013, this story appeared in the Financial Times. A Dutch court ruled that a subsidiary of Royal Dutch Shell was partly responsible for oil pollution in the Niger Delta, but said the company was not liable for 4 of the 5 charges brought against it. Shell welcomed the verdict, but Friends of the Earth, pressure group that brought the charges, expressed disappointment and said it would appeal. Other groups hailed the ruling as a victory. The court established that the spills were caused by sabotage, not poor maintenance on the part of Shell. Regarding the 204 spill near Goi and the 205 spill near Oruma, Shell Nigeria had taken sufficient precautions, said the court, to prevent sabotage and was therefore not liable for damage claimed by the farmers. But in the case of 2 spills near Ikot Ada Odu, it ruled that Shell's local subsidiary, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, had violated its duty to care and should be liable for negligence. Mutui Sunmonu, managing director of SPDC, said, "We welcome the court's ruling that all spill cases were caused by criminal act." It was not quite the victory that I assumed Ken would have sought, but it indicated that the struggle for social justice, like a glowing ember, still burns some 20 years after Ken's death. Unfortunately, Claude Ake died on November 7, 1996, when the Boeing 727 on which he was a passenger crashed into a lagoon in a mangrove jungle. One of his colleagues from the Association of African Social Scientists, Adele D. Jinadu, memorialized him in an appreciation of his life as follows. His radical social science turned its characteristically insightful searchlight to a devastating critique of the conflation of democratic agenda in Africa with bourgeois liberal democracy and its institutional and structural artifacts. The result was a contrary formulation in his democracy and development of a populist, people-centered, participatory, and perhaps social democratic alternative which recognizes the collective rights of subnational or ethnic groups and which allows representational voice at different levels for the marginalized civil society groups like students, workers, trade unions, among others. The implications were, in a sense, iconoclastic.